This is a historic little
What do you want?
event. Oh, right in front of here.
Okay.
Are you okay?
Like being floated. He always looks better than me. No.
We already have a guy who crawls on walls and spins webs. We already have a guy who's the god of thunder and a fellow who's got green skin and he breaks through buildings up and so forth. But since some viewers might not speak fluent Skrull, we'll use our mighty Marvel language converter. As a matter of fact, our sales have tripled in the past 3 years, which is quite a publishing phenomenon.
Slower, but still got 7.
No, you promised we were going to take this very serious.
Oh, hey, come on, I love this stuff for my youth.
I mean, my...
Spidey's 30th birthday. What do you get Spider-Man for 30?
Them in countless horror movies, they usually referred to as the dead who walk. Now, what can they possibly have to do with Tony Stark or his armored alter ego, the invincible Iron Man?
Well, I have a good feeling about this. Yeah. Michael. Peter's the guy building it. I just follow along, you know.
What a great team. You got a great guy.
He's just terrific. I never would have done this when my contract ended. He said, "Hey, Stan, now you're free. Let me build a company." If he could do it for me, imagine what he could do for you guys.
It's going to be the synergy.
200 to 300 fan letters every day, probably as much as the Beatles. I spend most of my time reading the mail and quite a lot of time answering it. During this time, I think I've learned a lot about what young people think. More importantly, I think I've learned a lot about what young people are.
Wouldn't want to change anything about me.
Gee, you're definitely not the same guy I've been writing about all these years.
My guest is somebody who is not only an old friend and associate, but one of the genuine talented movers and shakers of our business, Roy Thomas.
So I figured, okay, if we have to do a team, that's fine, but we're going to do it differently than anybody else does it. So instead of a lot of good guys who always won at the end and they were brilliant and they were superior to the villains and they never did anything wrong, we came up with the Fantastic Four, who inevitably did something wrong.
Paid dividends down the line. A lot of people seem to be short-sighted on a lot of things. So
How does it feel to know that someday in the future they'll talk of you as the man who popularized three-dimensional perspective webbing? I mean, boy, that's a distinctive trait. Nobody else will have anything like that.
Since moving to work at Marvel's production center in California, Lee has acquired a home with a pool, a pair of sunglasses we never saw him take off, and a position as an elder statesman with the folks back at the Marvel offices in New York. Stan still contributes to special issues.
And then another thing you might jot down, Jim. On page 13, he had his helmet on, and
Believers. I'm Stan Lee, co-author of How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and creator of Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, and a whole caboodle of other comic book characters that my legendary modesty prevents me from mentioning. Now, I'll be your host and guide as we journey together along the rambunctious road to comic book artistry, which is to say, it looks like we're stuck with each other for the next little while.
What is it that you're known for?
You got to be kidding.
I am, of course.
Well, originally I created Courageous Cat.
That was that animated show
an
you
animated
did, right?
cartoon. But I think when I was 18, I tripped across a character called Batman.
How do you pronounce it?
B-A-T-man. It was called Batman by Robert Kane. In 1939, when I was 3 years old, Stan. That's when I created the Batman. I'm now 42 on my good days. Anyway, Batman is my claim to infamy.
Yeah, I always thought it was the cat. Things to think about, because you always want something different. I remembered we had a character called the Human Torch who was very popular, and he was a guy. I mean, it's an everyday occurrence. He could burst in flame and fly. So it occurred to me, why not do the opposite? So that was Iceman.
Hey, true believers, I'm Stan Lee, and I want to tell you about the most fantastic sweepstakes ever. How would you like to work with me for a day as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics? Just enter the Kmart and Marvel Comics Watch and Win sweepstakes this May and June. Get your Watch and Win scratch-off game card at participating Kmart restaurants and win one of 18 million discounts on Kmart food and drinks, plus 2,500 other prizes. Just watch the Marvel Action Hour and answer my questions. Details at participating Kmart restaurants.